So welcome, Rafael. We really appreciate you presenting to us tonight. It was nice to be able to reach out to you and then have you volunteer to come and present. So as I mentioned before, we'll just get it up to you if you want to give a little information about who you are, kind of your background. And then as I mentioned to you before, we normally have questions and answers during the presentation, and that's still okay with Rafael. So thank you again. Now it's over to you.
First and foremost, thank you, Paul. So it's not every day that somebody that runs a community see our open source and then comes and asks us to join. So happily ever after. I'm going to talk mostly about the open source to keep it clean of vendor and everything. So I'm Rafael. I'm a co-founder, and I'm also the VP of Customer Experience in Up9. Customer experience to me is wherever we meet the customer, I want to make sure that they have a pleasant customer delight, as we said, with our products. It can be in the open source community, in a sales solution architect, in one of our customers post-sales. So that's what I do in Up9. Formerly, I was part of another startup called BlazeMeter, which got acquired by CA and Broadcom. We did JMeter in the cloud, transformed into continuous performance testing, and then continuous testing. I'm talking to you today from San Jose, California. I was planning to come in person. However, my fault on that, I couldn't make that, but definitely would love to come in person at one time. With that, I'll just tell you that keep it, I can see you guys, so if you raise your hand or something like that, I would like to get the question on the spot. However, I'm using two screens, so you will be over there. So if I don't notice you, feel free to shout out, and before I move a slide, just tell me about that. And I'm going to talk to you today about troubleshooting Kubernetes, kind of give you, set the level of everybody if you're new or you're very savvy in Kubernetes, about challenges and how we do it from traffic. So if you like eBPF or API or GraphQL, this is going to be an interesting talk to you. So with that, let me share my screen, your entire screen. Yeah. And this is a friendly environment, so I'm going to just keep presentation like that. You can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Super.
So wide.
Wait, now I can barely see the. Oh, here you go. Great. Let's see that. So quick agenda. I'm going to talk 10 minutes about like the pains. I'm going to introduce the open source tool called Mizu that does the API traffic. I'm going to do a deep demo on that. Feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. Short summary and frequently asked questions that we get about that and some next steps. So starting with, I'm just saving you for all the pyrotechnics that we have there. What is actually the problem with troubleshooting Kubernetes? If you go to, like when I go to customers and people, and you take a developer, put them in front of Kubernetes, they are not usually happy with that. The reason is they are used to have their application on their laptop. So all the code is there. I like to say your friend code is just include away. So you can just include that code, use it, debug it step by step, super fun. When we look into Kubernetes, then first and foremost, because of the nature of microservices, every service can decide on the best architecture for them. So you may find lots of protocols because that's the best architecture for that service. You can see GraphQL exists next to a REST, exists next to gRPC. Maybe there was like an acquisition that came with gRPC on top of REST. Of course, we have encryption, so MTLS if it's like a Istio or Linkerd, and of course HTTPS that goes outside of for like Salesforce, Stripe. So first and foremost, you need to know how to handle all those technologies. Second of which, everything that used to be on my laptop, the business logic is now API, and it's a bit harder to debug that because in addition to the normal code, I also need to deal with traffic and network. For example, latency, a pod moves from one node to another, and that may cause a slight delay, which a slight delay of 100 milliseconds can mean a lot to a microservice because that's the expectation. And with that, the transition basically for a developer, and we'll talk about the DevOps in a second, but if I'm a developer and I used to, in the monolith, have my external APIs, let's say the GitHub and the Stripe of the world, and I had my public interfaces and private functions, with Kubernetes, the external API stayed the same. I still suffer Salesforce. The public interfaces, the one that sat next to me, they're now also kind of external APIs, because I cannot just step-by-step debug them. I literally need to do an API call, or I need to put something on my Kafka queue or my RabbitMQ, and all I left is my private functions. But that also is a problem because they are now distributed across many repositories. I'm not going even into like a single repository, multi-repository. It's just the fact that it's multiple teams that, unless we decided on a single infrastructure for code and everything, I might have problems going into that code as well. So what can we do today? We need different tools. So with traditional tools like APM and monitoring, we saw only just a glimpse of what we could do with the APIs. Basically, which API was called and what was the performance of that. We don't see the full stack for that. Come distributed tracing, which is great. It tells us that, hey, if you implement some piece of code, you'll be able to trace the function, etc., which is great for business. But it introduced two problems. One, now my developers needs to code for debugging. And the second of which is that if I debug that, like if there is a problem, I didn't put a trace for it, it might be problematic and I can catch it only in the next time. Two other technologies that we have is that one is production debuggers. So things like Rookout or Lightrun that literally allows you to place breakpoints and be able to debug your code. Definitely help with debugging the code. And things like what we do in Up9 is covering the API and the traffic. So regardless of the protocol, regardless of where you are, you're able to see the traffic and diagnose that. So how we do that, we had the product. Once the product worked, what we did is kind of wrap the tappers into a product and release it to the open source. And we thought about how to call it. We called it Mizu. Mizu in Japanese is water. So kind of flow of the traffic that you can see. Also a good sushi if you're ever in the Bay Area. And what Mizu does is basically, first, it utilizes kubectl APIs to kind of hook itself into your nodes. The second thing, it just look at what you ask to view. Is it a namespace or a regular expression? And then it hooked itself to the relevant nodes that have those pods and transmit the traffic to you. You can see the protocols that there are here. And of course, in addition to that, using technologies such as eBPF, you can also see encrypted traffic. Now, if I need to explain what Mizu is, it's the Chrome dev tools for your Kubernetes cluster. So a really nice GUI representation that allows you to slice and dice your traffic from the browser. Now, it's meant to be a point-and-shoot tool, meaning two things. One, show me the cluster. Let's view that. And because it's a point-and-shoot tool, it comes with, and it's open source, it comes with like everything in the database and etc. that basically once you do Control-C, it cleans after itself. So the idea is that you can look at a cluster, automatically launch Mizu, see the traffic, debug, do whatever you want. You can even invite somebody else, like do Mizu view, and they will be able to look at the same traffic as you see. But once you do Control-C, it eliminates everything. Here, I'll say there is a Mizu Pro that you can leave long and add-ons, and I'll talk about it later. But that's the coolest thing about Mizu. So before I jumped into the demo, any questions from the audience?
So just want to make sure, just like what are the security aspects of it? What type of, authorization do you need to make for Mizu? And is there auditing or those type of things to kind of help with the security people?
I will touch about that here.
Good, okay.
Thanks. But for the sake of this demonstration, what you need to keep in mind is that to run Mizu, I should have kubectl permissions to deploy my application, okay? So think of like your dev or like some kind of a pre-production where you have access to that. And that's the intention of that. For production environment, I won't say don't use it, but there are some ways to use it still, but most likely you won't have permissions, or I would not advise to give everybody permissions to your production environment and do it like that. There are other ways to do that. So to start, let's switch to here, and we'll get to that in a sec. So I'm just using my terminal, and the first thing I want to do is download Mizu. So I'll just go to get Mizu.io or to the GitHub repo, doesn't matter. And in my case, I have an M1 machine, so I'm just downloading the M1 Mizu file. And that's it. To tap, I can do, like it says here, Mizu tap everything. That will even tap the kube system namespace. Or I can just do Mizu tap n and the namespace that the namespace that I have, press enter. And with that, what will happen is that now Mizu using kubectl API will deploy a couple of nodes. Let me show you how it looked like behind the scene. So this is sockshop. Okay, this is whatever my application is there. And if I will go to namespaces and I will select Mizu, you will see that I have 4 pods, one for each of my nodes, and one pod which is basically this application that you see on your left, right? The daemon sets, their job is basically to capture the traffic of the namespace sockshop, and the API server just brings that to me. Okay, so let's start. This is the actual application, right? So you can see that there are a lot of things going on here. First thing that I want to see is kind of a high level of what's happening. And for that, I have something called the service map, which basically shows me all the pods connected to the services. I see people are having some trouble to see that, so let me try. I've never tried that with that kind of resolution, so everything can happen. So basically, you can see this is my front end. Front end calls catalog. It calls the users, and I have orders. Orders is really nice because it's called also shipping. Shipping puts something on a RabbitMQ. Why I know it's RabbitMQ? Because I look at the protocols here. And I also have payments, right? So if I am an SRE or I am an on-call or something like that, and I need to understand who talks with whom, at what ratio, so we can see there are very few payments, consider logins, and consider catalog viewing. I can see that. I can see who talks with whom with which protocol. And I can, of course, go in here and kind of decide, hey, I want to focus only on front end and the user and maybe shipping. And then I can see that, oh, none of them is calling shipping. It's only internal. Great, no problem. The second thing I want to do is I want to start slice and dice all that data. So the easiest way to do is just stand on a protocol here, or like this one, and kind of say HTTP. And now I'm seeing only HTTP traffic. And I can also say, okay, you know what? I want to see all the errors in my system. So everywhere you see that plus sign, you basically click on that, and it will add it here. And this filter is absolutely smart because it allows you to do a lot of crazy stuff, from date time, ups and downs, equals, not equal, and of course, regular expressions. I can really utilize a lot of things here. So for example, I can see everything that is above 400. and just do that. And now I can see GraphQL issues. GraphQL is over HTTP, so that's the thing. I can see orders issues here. And once you see that, you get full access to everything. So the request, the response, and I can literally see all of the response data. If I would like to, let's pick orders for that matter. I can have rules applied to it. Oh, this one was with some rules. The beauty of the open source is that I can provide a YAML file and define rules. In this case, I've defined a rule about the response time that you see here. So let's say I want to see everything that is above 100 milliseconds. I'll do 100 here. And now I will only see performance type of response. So if I need to do that, let's just do a quick refresh, or maybe do a login. Let's do a bad login here. That's what happened in our demos. Again. Oh, 1 sec. I'll probably. So if I'll do a quick refresh, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. Everything works great when the environment is fresh. Let's grab something here. Here we go. Yeah, so, and in a moment I will talk about how I transfer that to kind of a compliance, okay? Back to my previous request, let's do HTTP, and I want to see all the errors, so I'll re-add the response code above 400, go. And now I want to show you an example of, let's say I want to do figure out the problem with my login. So I have a successful login, okay? And if I do that, that is great. I will be able to see my login traffic here. Actually, let's just do one more thing before I do that. Let's do a login with the wrong password. So I'll just add to that password here. And I already see the logins here. Just to make it easier, I'll just add the path. And now we can fully focus on just the login. I want this request. Here we go. So let's say I want to examine a bad login. And I'll do that. The first thing you see is this request, the 401, which is basically exactly the same one that you see here in your DevTools. So you already got some kind of a connection of what happened. The second one, as you see, is the one to the pod. So actually what happened is that this calls the service, and the service calls a specific pod. Because sometimes you may have one call go to a specific pod, and you may have multiple pods. So you can track that as well. And in this response, you can actually see unauthorized. I got an unauthorized request, which is great. But if I'll try and do something that with the user that doesn't exist, then you'll see that I actually get 500. So from the user perspective, they still got 401, right? But Mizu shows me something better, that the user service is now responding with 500 not found, which is a bit problematic. So if I'm an SRE, I can literally take that and regenerate this with curl or something like that, and kind of go to the user owner and kind of tell them, guys, listen, you shouldn't respond with 500. It should be 404 because it's not found, or if you want to keep it at a security level, maybe 401 with something that says that, you know, unauthorized. From a different perspective, if I'm monitoring my system and I see 500 on my logins, I can already pop something back to those to these guys and kind of say, hey guys, you are getting 500. They can use the same filter to track that and understand what the problem is. So that's one way to do that. Let me just log in and create another problem. Now there will be, this is like a bug, right? But if I want to go, and I will just remove that from here and just focus on the HTTP. And now what I want to do is I want to create a limitation. So if I buy the holy socks, which I really love because they're holy, and I'm trying to actually buy them, what I will get is a business problem that the payment got declined. how would I debug that? So first and foremost, I probably want to understand which service is responsible for that. So I can go to the service map and kind of see, okay, if in my services, again, resolution is interesting. I can track what happened with like carts, and I can see that I have the payments. So payments is something that comes from orders. I'll probably want to have orders and payments in. So fine, let's go and just add something with payment. And it probably looks like, oh, actually, that is the source. I want to do something else. I want to grab the orders and just do something that starts with payments. And I can even add a regex to that. So let's do a regex, something with payments. And see that. Not the right thing. Okay. Let's click on that, and then I'll remove GraphQL and not GraphQL because it creates a lot of problems for me. Here we go. GraphQL. So now I can focus on that. So let's regenerate that. Here we go. We see the catalog. Have this one, response, name holy, exception sock fit, that's great. And what I got here, something out of the blue. Oh, here is something from customer. And here's something from here. What I'm doing right now is basically generating tracing on demand. If I would like to have something more obvious than that, how would I do that? Let's see. So I would like to focus on a specific service for that matter, right? Let's track all the front-end service calls and see what I have here. Not actually, front-end will probably have the cards in it. So I can see the cards and response. Sorry. I get 406. 406, great. Let's add 406 here. $406. And press proceed. Okay. So now I see 406 of orders getting the unacceptable, and it actually comes from orders that is getting that, right? So payment decline. I can go and understand where the business logic is, and I see it's in order. So now I can drill down into, let's say, the code of orders and go and change the code to maybe more than 100, or if the user has the role of, I don't know, let's say a partner, then they can order as much as they want. I will not want to limit them. And again, if once I do Control-C here, then I basically killed Mizu. So if I'll go to pods, pods are dead, and I'm good. So the tool kind of removed itself, doesn't leave any trace for that. Now, that's nice when you have a point-and-shoot tool. I want to show you something and be happy to get your feedback as well. Today, we're doing some closed beta. So what you see here is the same open source, which was designed to run forever. Meaning, if I just change this environment, Mizu here is basically continuously running, and it's exposed to any user with like a load balancer and a public IP. That means you don't need kubectl permissions for that. If I would like to create something that is like HTTP and show me all traffic that has any sort of error like that, I can monitor my system for that. And not only that, what I can do is I can copy that, and whatever the regex is here, I can go and create a compliance rule for that. And of course, there will be a problem once I want to show that. And the compliance rule can be like show me all the HTTP errors, which is, everything blows up for me. Basically putting it here. But this is the obvious. What I didn't show you is that while we are actually using Mizu, we're also creating the service catalog. By the way, this is also part of the open source, so I forgot to mention that. So, for example, if I show you the front end, now you see everything like an open API spec created from the traffic, right? And what I can decide to do is I can create a compliancy rule for that. So if I go here, and I can say, I want to make sure my front-end calls, ignore that, comply or conform to spec. All I need to do is specify the server, the service for that, of the OAuth, and then put the filter here, which is basically any HTTP call that comes to or goes out from front end, and apply it to the right application, and press save. I can even have a Slack webhook here that can do that. So one and foremost, if somebody changed the spec, I will get a notification, and it can be either two things. One, somebody enhanced the spec and we need to upgrade the spec. And for that, we can just regenerate it. Or somebody broke the spec, and me as the service owner, the API architecture, we can work on that. This, for example, is how to recognize login problems, right? So I created all the problems that comes from a specific path that users, an API that is used by users and has some kind of authorization key that I can provide, or I can just remove that. This will be for performance. Show me everything that is 200 milliseconds and above and has a response code of 200 something. Why? Because errors comes really fast, so I don't care about that. I just want to see the ones that are 200 and something. This is the spec that I showed you before. And I will stop with that because it breaks for me. The third thing that we have is code snippets. So if I'm a developer and I work against someone else's microservice, what I can do is I can have code snippets generated from the traffic. Now, the cool thing is we can have the latest sample. Let me get that. So we can have the latest sample in any folder that you want. So we can have it in Go. Or we can have one of the specific response codes that we have, 406. And what we can have is something that is generated directly from the OAuth base. So we take the OAuth that we created, generate a code sample from that. And the idea for that is now, as a developer, you have the open API spec in Mizu. You have everything that you need here to track your problem. Using the code snippets, you can actually regenerate it if you want, or grab the code that you need for that specific entry. And if you found the problem, you can now create a compliancy rule to make sure that if that problem reoccurs, you will fetch it. So you can implement a fix and then see if it actually worked or not, and monitor that for the foreseeable future. Hope that wasn't too much. Now, let me go to some frequently asked questions. So how to tap my entire cluster? I mentioned Mizu tap -a. That's it. It's easy. How can I reduct? So what I showed you with Mizu, out of the box, it removes from the source everything that has authentication, token, password. For example, if I want to show it to you here, let's take the code snippet for a second. If we go to the login example, which is the most problematic one, we will be able to kind of see that the authorization key is removed completely. In all of my examples, I will not be able to, this one was removed, I will not be able to see the traffic. However, in case that somebody actually needs that, it's just a click away. So you can go to the settings and just click on that checkbox, press save, and then Mizu will include reducted information. the reason for that is that if you need to debug, and of course you can control that list. If you need to debug something, you can activate it, assuming you have the right permissions for that. You know what you're doing, but out of the box, let's protect the developers and not show them personal information in case we have that, or just create security that you don't use someone else's token by accident. So that's for that. Are we using sidecar? No. And I will touch that in the permissions. But what we actually do, we started with sidecar. The problem with sidecar technology is that it double or sometimes triple the amount of pods that you have. What we do is for unencrypted traffic, we use libraries such as TCP dump, ptrace, etc. And that allows us to see on the node level everything that happens on the wire. So we are as good as those libraries. For MTLS, we literally go directly into Linkerd or Istio and get that before and after the encryption, and to show you that data. And for TLS, we do use eBPF, but only if you must. So you don't have to start with give us everything and we will show you that. The open source is kind of guiding you to that. If you give us everything, we'll show you everything, which comes down to permissions. For the TLS and MTLS, we do require Linux capabilities, as you see here. However, if you decide not to give Mizu those, then Paul, I will share the presentation later on, so you can forward it to the group. I see people have a hard time to kind of read what we require. And you don't always have to use everything, for TLS. Sometimes you just want to have a shared environment, allow people to do that. So you can do that. The requirements are very so to Mizu. It's basically if you have kubectl deploy, you probably have the permissions that you need. And if not, I can show you in the presentation where you can go to Mizu permissions and see exactly what are the permissions that Mizu is requiring. Overhead of capturing. Okay. Usually we get, okay, this is nice, but like how much of an overhead do you have? So first and foremost, it really depends on the amount of traffic that you have. Dev environment that people are working and developing against is not equal to a production environment or a performance testing environment getting tons of RPS. So the first thing that we do is we run in a
I want pizza. No.
I forgot the affinity for that is that we prioritize the running application and not the traffic. Of course, you can always get you can always change that. You can install Mizu with kubectl or with the Helm install and change that. But if the cluster is overwhelmed, then we will prioritize the application, not Mizu. That's the first thing. The second thing is the requirement for unencrypted traffic is lib pickup, and it's very low. It uses the buffer of the lib pickup, and assuming normal usage, it should capture whatever you need. And for eBPF, it's minimal. However, if you're going to run a lot of requests per second, then yes, there might be some packet lost over there because the buffer gets filled up quite quickly. To change that, you need to elevate the permission of that by risking more response time. So it's a trade-off, but you need to choose your poison, unfortunately. Next steps, you can read. I would love, one, what do you think about what I showed you with compliance, with the code snippets, and any feedback about the tool? To get it, just go to getmizu.io and you can start. The open source, the only difference between the open source and the vendor is scale. That's it. So the open source comes with databases that are fit for that it can be easily distributed, can be easily killed. You don't need to kind of do a great installation for that. The vendor, the Mizu Pro, comes with more robust databases such as Mongo and Elastic, which are able to handle and slice and dice more traffic to them. Questions?
Pretty cool stuff. I think the compliance stuff is really interesting. So this was kind of beta features of the open source as well. Is that what you're saying, Rafael?
To tell you the truth, one sec. I think I'm feedbacking because I raised my volume here. We don't know. At the moment, we decided to kind of put it in the public beta. We have a beta for the Mizu Pro, so we put it out there. The code snippets, for example, are probably going to go into the open source. The compliance, I need to check if they're like, because we're using like libraries. I think they are open source. I don't know, but given a license permissions, then we will open source that.
Yeah. Well, the code snippet is really cool. I really like that.
If I may drill a little bit, like where do you see the usage for the code snippets for yourself?
It's kind of like kind of a, how do I say it? A source code view of an open API, if that makes sense. It kind of gives, for those that are not just JavaScripters, right? You can then, generate the Go code or generate the Java code or whatever, and you can really see it. I don't know. I thought it was cool. I could use it. I thought it was really neat. So. Any others? Any other thoughts on that?
I don't know, maybe the audience the question. So the docs show, just connect with, and what you already did was, you get the binary, you connect with Mizu tap, it launches some stuff in the namespace and cleans itself up. What happens when two people run tap at the same time?
Good point.
Good point. So I think I can replicate that. Let's see. So here I'll do that, and I'll just do, and let's give it a second. So this is Mizu tapping number 1, and now I'll do Mizu tap 10, and the first thing it will tell you is that it's already running. But I told you there is a collaboration. So if you see that, or let's say, I'm sorry, what is your name?
Sorry, I'm in the meeting here, Carson.
Carson. So Carson, if you're my on call, I need to just tell you, hey Carson, please do Mizu view. Click enter, and now it will connect you to the Mizu view that I have, so we can look at the same place. That's the idea. This is on the open source level. I would rather have this, assume everybody has kubectl. The idea is that you will be able to kind of do a load balancer service and then have like something that, everybody can do, like a Mizu and then your DNS, and you can just go there.
Okay. I can't remember if you already mentioned, but gRPC, is that something that can be looked at?
Yes. How can I? In my small demo environment, I plugged in all the protocols, and you can see them here. So HTTPs, gRPC, obviously, GraphQL. This is something we just added. I think in the latest release in 32, we added the support to GraphQL. ActiveMQ, which is Dat and Rabbit, Kafka, and Redis.
Okay. Do API gateways, I guess they wouldn't get in the way. I mean, you can still see the flow. Is that?
Elaborate, please. What do you mean?
Well, I'm just trying to think. If you...
You're talking about like cloud API gateways?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about stuff in the cluster?
Well, probably Well, the cloud's gonna be a problem no matter what.
Yeah, you wouldn't have much inside of the cloud.
Inside the cloud, inside the cluster,
Yeah, just show up as another hop. I mean, it's a
well,
word.
this would be just another hop, right?
I imagine. Imagine if you had an ingress gateway or API gateway or like any of those, they're just gonna be like one of the big circles in your network map, like.
Yeah.
It will definitely be a huge circle, and I can tell you, for example, in this application, the front end, which here we go, the front end is actually the API gateway in the sock shop application, right? But as you said, if the API gateway is let's say hosted in the cloud, you can't really deploy into that, but you will be able to recognize all the calls that come from it and to it, right? Because we track both ways. And then you will have that huge circle. And it's kind of interesting because this is where we're going at, like, if you have like a cloud, like AWS gateway or RPG or something like that, and you're not hosting it, then we'll be able to do that. Interesting enough, nobody says Lambdas or like serverless.
How do those fit then?
So the reason I'm raising that is that just raise your hand. How many of you have significant an important portion of your application written in serverless technology?
Not much.
Here, now.
Wrong group for that.
Hey, Raphael, I do have one question for you.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, first of all, this is fantastic. I love it. This UI and the background screen, everything is in sync, and it's live streaming.
Oh, it's still working. One sec. Let me spare your eyes.
Am I audible to you? Okay. So my question is, you consider the AMQP, HTTPs, and almost all the important protocols. Are you considering the SIP protocol in this live streaming to be as a part of debugging?
Excuse me, say what protocol did you mention?
SIP.
SIP?
Yeah, it's a telephony protocol. So SIP. Yeah.
Interesting question. I don't know. Is it like a proprietary one?
No, it's not a proprietary one.
It's for voice over IP.
It's a voice over IP protocol.
Oh, wow. Interesting. I've never got that. You're the first one. Interesting. You're the first one that is asking for that. Have a look. For us, setting a protocol that is not proprietary it's not a big problem.
Yeah, because I'm currently, it's not right now, but it's a long time. I'm thinking, I'm planning to see inbuilt or something live streaming to check how to debug these things, quick debugs, quick issue finding. But yeah, this is cool because most of the protocols I have used with this SIP, with this telephony, almost all. That's only one is missing.
More that we don't know about.
Do you include raw exports? Like, could you actually get a PCAP out of it?
Yeah, I got a pickup out of it. There are the SIP Homer and the VoIP monitor. They are proprietary to find out this one, but this telephony is having multiple running pieces. They need the messaging technologies, Kafka, AMQP, GPRC, gRPC, RPC, web services. So these are almost all the protocols, and these are all tied together. So currently I'm having the same. So I'm thinking to something I change in my code, it should get immediately reflected, and I should see what's the changes and how it's been functioning.
I think we found a contributor to your open source community for SIP.
Bring it on. Everything is Apache too, so feel free, and we'll be happy to. I have a question. Somebody mentioned pickup. Here is a challenge that we had. So at the very beginning, we only had HTTP, gRPC, and Kafka. So this was like the bare metal that we started with. And then somebody asked us to export. So can you export your records or like the entries? I want to have like a run Mizu for 5 minutes and export the data. And there is a problem with that because if you export the TCP, it's not a user friendly too much, and some of them you actually need to rewrite it from scratch. And there is no single way to kind of have asynchronous APIs, synchronous APIs. If you see do you see value of exporting that? And if so, do you have an idea, or how would you do that, of exporting the entries other than create your own entry schema?
I could definitely see it for when there's like actual issues on the networking layer. Like, it's great parsing the protocol when everything's good. If you're actually having some weird, obscure TCP state that you're trying to track down. I know there are other tools that try to do similar wire TCP dump into pods and kind of grab a capture. I could see like brief bursts of, give me a 5-minute window of traffic on this node and just capture it for me so that I can do my raw analysis. I can see that being a useful like escape hatch when maybe it is a protocol you don't currently parse, or something's really screwy and parsing the protocol isn't gonna provide you the answer you want.
And in which format you would like to have data exported to you?
I mean, just raw PCAP or, stuff that works with TCP dump and Wireshark and all the normal tools you're gonna work with, so.
Okay.
I have one other question. Do you currently make use of any tracing information? So like if you're already using tracing, can you interpret that and help wire up stuff that was happening across different services?
If you're already doing tracing, then you can do whatever you want with the headers, or the way you've done the tracing. You can literally specify it. Let's say, if you've done like a tracing of a business flow and you represented it with a header or with some contexts or something like that, you can just add that, create a filter for that, and literally see your tracing in Mizu.
Do you treat Zipkin or OpenTrace or any of those special, or if the information there, you can use it, but it's not like a first-class thing yet? Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to attach ourselves to any of the open tracing, but you are definitely able to utilize the filter and the compliancy to do whatever you want with it.
Gotcha.
Is there a record capabilities and then like a replay, or is that something that's in the commercial, or what can you do for like a capture for a bit and then maybe able to replay it back?
Okay. We used to have that in the commercial. It's not really replay. Let me try and answer that and tell you if that's what you thought. The code snippet that I showed you, we will be able to actually create tests based on those code snippets. But just replaying that, this is actually something I did in BlazeMeter.
Yeah.
The problem with that is most of the records that are not GET, and even the GET ones, are probably not gonna work because keys, because dynamic values, single page application, etc. So help me out here. Give me a real life scenario where you will record for 5 minutes, and if you're replaying that, it's actually worth something.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm just thinking, I like what you were just saying. It just made me think about, when you on the fly create tests, right? To actually, then use in your end-to-end or integration testing is one. And then I was just thinking perhaps on some load or performance testing type harnesses that may be useful.
I'm 100% with you. However, if you don't put something in your backend to support those kind of scenarios, it's just gonna blow away.
Yep.
I wonder if that blog is still there. I wrote like a blog about how to use JMeter to stress test like wiki pages, because those usually work. It's just static pages. You can record it, boom, and that's it. Like record a 24-hour day, and then replay it with 5 minutes or an hour, and you're good to go. Here's your performance test. I yet to find an organization that literally built in those record and replay mechanism into their infrastructure. Not saying it's impossible. It's definitely possible to do, but you need to make sure that you record the right, you have all the databases are status aligned for that.
Thank you.
To your question, let's assume I've implemented the pickup, the pickup integration or export. Then you'll be able to just record, export to pickup, and then take it from there.
What does it look like if you have multiple clusters? Do you install it separately in each cluster?
Yep. So at the moment, that's not the first time we hear that. So at the moment, at least the open source is a point and shoot for a single cluster, just because of the complexity of supporting more than one cluster. We are thinking about that. We're just trying to figure out, one, the user experience for that, because today we are utilizing kubectl. So the context is always one cluster. How we need some other context to understand that this cluster is a cube of cubes, and without a vendor, and there are vendors that are doing that, but we will need to do an integration to that vendor, which kind of, it's an open source discussion if you're doing that in an open source or not. Because then, hey, why don't you do it to another vendor, right? So on the open source, it's not that I'm saying no, I just don't know how to do it right now. For the Mizu Pro, this is an easy question. Like, this is an easy answer, yes. Because then it's a vendor to vendor and it's easy.
So let's just talk just very quickly from the commercial side. How's this licensed, or how does it, is it a seat license, or is it a traffic license, or what is it?
Okay, if you want, I can talk about that. Basically, it's not per seat, it's per deployment, and it's the amount of traffic and retention that you want. So, for example, let's look at the metrics that says I want to have 24 hours of data that I can slice and dice with the filter and everything. So that 24-hour translate into X amount of gigabytes, which requires that kind of installation. And then it fits to a cluster. And then basically, the more cluster you have, then you need more licenses, right? That's the idea. Now, if you have two clusters that are part of one application, what do we do there? Talk with our sales. Right, but those are good problems to have. There are integration to Elastic, for example. So what if you want to have a month of data? Then we don't do that kind of stuff. The reason is that it's rare that you actually need to slice and dice for 1 month. Then what we do, you decide if you want us to export it to your Elastic or something like that. And then you can have rules that says, okay, if this happens, export it to Elastic, or Monday, I want to take the last 7 days and grab them into Elastic. based on those set of rules. And this is what will happen. So that's the difference between the open source and the vendor free.
Is the positioning, it sounds like it really is a developer tool rather than, I mean, that it could be a troubleshooting tool, meaning in production, but it's really to identify within a developer-friendly environment. Is that kind of the right way of approaching this? I mean, you could certainly use it as a troubleshooting tool or diagnostic tool in production, but maybe not because of the rights and the security aspect. Is that correct?
Interesting. So from what we see is the first people that actually adopt the tool are the DevOps. And the reason is because they can do whatever they want, right? So it's like permissions, forget about it. I have everything I need. So it's easy for them to do that. And then comes like, hey guys, how do I send that to my developers? Because I don't want them to have kubectl deployed to my shared environment. And this is where it comes down. But there are some organizations that have like their shared environment, like staging for developers. Everything is great. They can do that. So basically, the tool is like I would tell you, Wireshark. Wireshark is for anybody that needs to look at the network traffic. It's agnostic if you're a dev or a DevOps or an SRE or a tester or a performance tester. But usually what we will see is that either dev and DevOps will adopt it first. And then once it's robust in the organization, they will just invite everybody else, depending on, like, some will go only to the dev and pre-prod, some will go to production, some will have some kind of a user behind the vault that given authorization, they will get that because they will be able to access production, for example. And the beauty of it that at least one customer of us has that in production, and developers, again, there is a process to get the temporary password for that user, but once they got that, they can see everything in production without having access to production, and with the reduction rules that were set. So they are not exposed to PII, but they still are able to figure out the problem.
Have you heard of a company called Extrahop?
Extrahop?
Yeah, they do a very similar approach for like traditional network. It's like a network appliance that does packet analysis and then lets you kind of inspect it at a higher level. And they get no visibility into Kubernetes. So you do inside a cluster basically what they did outside.
So what you're suggesting we should partner?
I had a lot of times where that tool saved my bacon before I was using Kubernetes. And then once I started using Kubernetes, I could no longer use that kind of tool. So
Extrahop.
Yeah.
With the E or without the E?
Extrahop, just like a network hop.
That one?
That's the one.
Okay,
Yeah,
we because they're such a good tool, we also gave them some space here in this presentation.
Yeah, and they have a lot of similar like useful dashboards, useful views of aggregate network information that you might find interesting. I don't know how much you can do without actually buying one of these things. I haven't used it for many years now, but it was a very useful tool that did that same kind of analyze packets and then provide information at a higher level instead of just assuming low-level TCP streams. We used it to find expiring certs. They would always look on the wire for certs that were about to expire, and we just sent an alert on it because you're like, yeah, that's useful information to know. I'm assuming you could do something very similar of look for certs that are about to expire and send an alert because
it's one of the thing, and I'll share it. You know what? I'll share it here. One of the partnerships that we're doing is with the Microsoft, one of the libraries of Microsoft for PII information. And there is actually a model that is not publicly available at the moment that we just stream the data to some machine learning based algorithm that basically identify like credit cards, phone numbers, etc. And for PII, you have two problems, right? You have like and I can do that for certification. I can do it for everything that we see in our traffic, right? I can even have set of rules that I can decide for myself. But the idea is with PII is that one, you want to make sure that it doesn't go by accident. So if, let's say, I called an API call, I got a JSON object, and now I'm transferring the entire object to another call. Maybe some of that object was personal information which shouldn't be transferred. But this is an internal problem. We can fix that, no problem.
Okay.
The bigger problem is that, let's say you have a support center, and then somebody cluelessly says, hey, I want a refund for my credit card, and here's the credit card number. Now you have PII information without knowing that. This is a bigger problem because you not necessarily have a way to kind of identify that in advance. So certification, PII, lots of security fun can be done. We're exploring that. Thanks for letting us know.
Well, any other questions? This was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I learned a lot as well. So.
Thank you very much. And if you wouldn't mind, maybe the slides, send them to me and we can put them out. And also, we'll get this put on our YouTube channel, this recording, and we'll let you know also when that gets posted. So
Amazing.